The 2025 MLS season is finally here. With that come renewed hopes, optimism, and dreams. And now that the season is here, we can have one holistic review of the Quakes off-season moves. My name is Kevin, I'm joined by Luis, and together we're the Quakesaholics. Luis, here in person, drove up for the home opener. How you doing?
Good. Very excited for the beginning of the new season. Long drive, but after the conversation we had last night, just kind of hyping ourselves up. Definitely good. Definitely excited to be back and hoping for a good season.
Yeah, definitely hoping for the good season. I think this is definitely the most optimistic time of the year for me, the happiest time of the year for sure. For today, we wanted to do one holistic review of everything that's gone on in this offseason in case you've missed anything. Starting from the coaching changes, Bruce Arena coming in, all the players that have stayed, departed, and the players that are just coming in. And then we want to contextualize those moves, comparing that to what other MLS teams have done. And then, just giving our thoughts on overall how we're feeling about things going into tomorrow's game. Okay, so in case you missed it, this is basically where the roster is at right now. Compared to last year in this G column, these are all the players that we've retained. It's ordered by how many minutes have played. So the higher up, you can think of it as like the more crucial players, and some of these names probably shouldn't be surprising. Then in terms of the departed, there actually have been a lot of departures compared to other years. The biggest one, Jackson Newell, our captain, he's departed. Carlos Gresso, who was a designated player on a tremendous salary, has also departed. Jeremy Bobasi, his contract option was not exercised by the club, and he decided to go as a free agent to LAFC, and we can go down the list of all the changes that have happened. For the players in, this was probably the more exciting part. At first, it wasn't too reassuring. The first trade was these three players. They were all coming from New England, same as Bruce Arena. And then we got the Nick Lima signing as a free agent, and then finally the Earl Edwards Jr. All five of these players are coming from New England. In total, it was actually pretty good business in terms of money. It was $650,000 in GAM, and then the salaries we don't know exactly, for example, like Nick Lima. But that's a lot of players for, truthfully, not a whole bunch of money.
Is that for all of them combined?
Yes. So the first three was $500,000 split evenly between 2025 and 2026. Nick Lima, free agent, and then Earl Edwards, goalkeeper reinforcement, was only $150,000. But yeah, these all happened pretty quickly in succession, if I remember correctly. And then
it felt like every other day we were seeing someone go there to New England and someone coming here, and it was just about like who we're gonna see next kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those sentiments you can still see them in the comments. And it didn't help that they were also signing our players who walked in free agency, like Jackson Newell, like Tanner Beeson. But really things got exciting when Chicho Arango was announced. That is a $1.4 million deal split evenly again between 2025 and 2026. That is a new designated player. And then that put us at 4 designated players, which kind of had an awkward situation for Carlos Gresso, which saw him eventually do a mutual contract termination. It was an interesting time because he was already at his new club in Ecuador, and the Quakes didn't announce anything for like a week or two.
I think we had some suspicions, right? Because preseason, people were coming back. Gresso just wasn't here. Waited a few more days, still wasn't here. So yeah, and then once we saw him training in Ecuador, I think that kind of
deal is sealed.
Yeah, the deal is sealed.
And then within 48 hours of the Chicho signing, actually before we even got the news of the Chicho signing, the rumors were already really strong about Josef Martinez. And then, like I said, 24 hours later, something like that, Josef Martinez was announced as a free agent signing. And really those are the two marquee signings of this window. And then going down the list, there was an MLS Super Draft, as well as actually a signing today from Minnesota United's second team. This is pretty typical. You see these kind of reinforcements every year. We got to see them in preseason at Coachella. They look good, and they're part of the roster now.
And I think it is also important to remember that Max Floriani and Reed Roberts were 2nd and 5th round draft picks, respectively. So. Correct. They're draft players. Yeah, they're from college, but I've said this before. The United States college system is becoming increasingly more competitive. A lot of players from around the world see it as an opportunity to get to play soccer, maybe get a chance with the draft or through a scouting opportunity, while getting an education as well along with that. So I think that it's not something to scoff at. I think that it's developed a lot in the coming years. I mean, we've had a few success stories. With Muni especially. So, excited to see what those guys can bring.
And then one interesting thing to note about these departures is that, yes, it is a significant amount of players, The first one to highlight, Emi Ochoa, that was a transfer that I think it was a report about like $2 million transfer fee that the Quakes got from this.
2 million, yeah.
Yeah, and then if you also consider how much salary cap is being opened up by this, so here's the actual 2024 player salaries. These are pulled from the MLSPA reports, and you can see here the red rows are all the players that have departed, and this all adds up to just over $6 million. Plus Emi's $2 million, that's, you can think of it as like $8 million of play money. I know it's not like a one-to-one translation, but it is a significant amount of money that is being moved. And I think that is a big part of the reason that we're seeing these kinds of signings like Chicho and Josef. Yeah, a lot of money in, and I would say that so far the money has been spent well. Luis, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, these are sorted by how much money they were getting paid.
Yes.
Yeah, and 4 of the top 10 most best played players on the roster got moved out. It's just so that's definitely a statement, if nothing else, about this team wants to make changes. It needs to make changes, and yeah, definitely. I don't think you can say that the Earthquakes didn't try to do something this offseason.
And then, is there anything that you want to talk about in particular about any of these incoming signings?
Yeah, I mean, I did touch a little bit upon, to not just gloss over the 2 drafts. But I mean, generally, like you said, what an exciting time it was when we saw Chicho, who we've been on the wrong side of before, especially during his time at LAFC. We know that he's a prolific striker. And, to talk about more prolific strikers, Josef Martinez, right? A player who, out of the players that are in the league right now, probably has... Don't think he'll do it, but he's the one that has the highest chance of threatening Wondolowski's record. He's over 100 goals. These are 2 solid, proven MLS goal scorers. And I think that's something that we've been concerned about for a while now. Obviously, last season did not get the output that we probably needed and wanted, especially from our number 9 and Jeremy Bobasi. So, yeah, exciting. And, defensively as well, a lot of changes in the midfield. Again, Jackson Newell, someone who's been at this club for a long time, to see him move on is something that I think a lot of Earthquakes fans, controversial, I think, for better or for worse. But he's one of those players that just felt like part of the furniture here for a long time. To see him actually move on is a big deal. And, to get Mark-Anthony Kaye, another player that if you've, been around the MLS for a while, you've definitely heard of him before. Might have even played with Chicho at LAFC for some time. He's been around the league too. And I think it's good, seeing all these players that have MLS experience. It's great. It's good to see their known variables. And, yeah, very exciting. That being said, of course, there are some question marks, I think. Still, even with that. The midfield, I think most of all. On the left, I think Pellegrino, it's fair to say that we didn't really get the Pellegrino we saw in Norway. He was a top goal scorer last season, but I think that is probably kind of at a detriment of the rest of our attack, if anything. So... yeah, there are some question marks, right? How is Martinez, Josef, Hernan, and Espinoza going to be on the field all at the same time whilst getting the most out of all 4 of them? That's a big question mark for Bruce Arena. How is he going to set up? We've seen some interesting lineups in the Coachella Invitational, with 5 in the back, and seeing Espinoza played as a right wing back to try to get... keep everyone up top, keeping the most talent on the field as possible. Feels like we might have to sacrifice some balance to do that, and how that's going to work out is yet to see. And the midfield, right? Seeing Yule depart, seeing Gressa depart, players that I think the majority of Quakes fans at this point are fine seeing go somewhere else, but it obviously does leave a void in that midfield. And personally, I feel like we haven't filled that void with the players that have come in. That's not to scoff at Harks or Mark-Anthony Kaye. It's just kind of like just a quantity problem. If one of those 2 players gets injured, especially Mark-Anthony Kaye, that kind of just leaves a lot of questions as to who's going to be slotting in for him. And yeah, so, overall exciting moves, big names, a lot of change, but I still obviously think that there's a lot of question marks still about how it's going to work and how it's going to play out throughout the season.
That's where we're at right now. This is what Bruce Arena is going to be moving forward with. I mean, the first press conference that he had, he was promising that he was going to bring MLS veterans, and I do think he delivered on that. But the thing is that it's not just a one-team league, and sometimes you got to put these things in context. And I mean, every single year, the transfer market and the off-season moves become more and more competitive. There's a lot more money being moved. There's a lot more talent being moved. And the transfer window isn't even closed yet, and we've already surpassed how much money has been spent as a whole league. So then that leads to the question of, okay, where are the Quakes in the larger scale of the league? We found this article. We thought it was pretty good, so we want to share the findings here. So there are a couple of charts in this article that we want to go through. And this first one is 2024 minutes by players on the 2025 roster. So what that means is if you count up how many minutes all these players have played in 2024 compared to the total minutes played, how many of that has been retained. Where the Quakes actually rank in this is at 63%. It's towards the bottom, meaning that we have retained fewer players on a per minute basis, meaning that the players that are actually getting minutes, the players that are actually playing, a lot of them have departed compared to last year. And I think that's to be expected. Part of what we wanted as a roster reconstruction, given how bad the 2024 season was, this is a good sign. But then we actually have to go deeper and say, okay, have we retained the good players or have we not? 2024 minutes by attacking players on 2025 roster. So this is actually measuring, it's similar to the last one, but it's just talking about attacking players. The numbers here are a little bit skewed because this person mixed all midfielders and all attackers together. And that's to account for players that are 10s, like playmakers and ball distributors. So like Yule, for example, is considered part of this, which I think is correct because he is an offensive player. But then the other side of that is that someone like Carlos Gresso is included in this, which is a little bit misleading. But the number overall is still good because it's on the lower side. It means that a lot has changed. And yes, Pellegrino was the top scorer last year, but that's only 7 goals. Right. It's single digits is not good for your top goal scorer. So this, again, was something that should have been expected. It is a good sign that changes are being made. And I mean, the biggest ones there are really Yule and Abobasi on a per minutes basis. But you can't just get rid of players. It's also important to retain players. And so how have the Quakes done in that? This chart is showing retained players by goals and assists. So this is basically measuring of the impactful players, how many are being retained. And the San Jose Earthquakes are at just shy of 86%, which is really good. What this means is that, yes, we only kept 60% of the roster, more or less, but in terms of where the goals are coming from, we've retained those players.
And also, I think an interesting thing, too, is looking at Real Salt Lake and Montreal, teams that you would expect Josef Martinez and Chicho to have big impacts, for them to have a big drain of GA and, it's to be assumed that is mainly coming from, or at least a big part of that is coming from Josef and Chicho. I think that's good news for us.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like we're getting the best pieces from these teams and we're retaining the best pieces of our team, which, I mean, this 86% basically is Cristian Espinosa. Like, it's synonymous.
Pretty much, yeah.
Then on the other side of things, the next one is the defensive players. So it's no secret that the Quakes defense last year was really bad, not necessarily just because of personnel, but also injuries and situations. This percentage is a little bit higher. It's at 72%. We've actually retained a lot more, and I think that is, players like Rodriguez, like Vitor Costa, Paul Marie, Bruno Wilson. So it kind of makes sense. A lot of the moves have been further up the field, but I do think that we've retained the better parts of the defense. The players that have moved on here are, players like Tanner Beeson, for example, in terms of like significant minutes played. Acapo as well, yes, that's correct. So the fact that we're on the lower side, I think is good because we've retained the players that were injured for a lot of the last season and that have proven that they are good. Of course, there's more to show. I think Bruno Wilson is one of those players where he did accumulate a lot of minutes, but he wasn't consistent. So maybe a little bit more to show there. But again, this is a good sign.
Yeah, just kind of thinking about what players defensively you'd want to keep. I think that we have kept for the most part. Bruno Wilson, I think you're right. We'll still have to see how he can be implemented into what Bruce Arena is thinking about. But overall, Bruno Wilson, great pass for the ball. Rodriguez, great on the ball as well, but also have a lot to offer defensively as well.
And then the last category, going all the way down the field, is goalkeepers. Goalkeepers is a really interesting topic for the Quakes because we had so many injuries last year. At one point, we were playing Jacob Jackson as a starter, who was, I would say at the time, like the fourth string keeper.
Inexperienced.
Inexperienced, yeah. And in a difficult situation where like the defenders are also injured. Very leaky, but anyways, it's in the past at this point. 35% is where the Quakes are at. That is Emmy leaving, that is Jacob Jackson leaving, that is JT Marcinkowski leaving, William Yarbrough leaving. I'm actually surprised that it's 35%. Like, I'm naming all those names. I'm like, okay, like, we've only retained Daniel, so it's like 1 out of 5. I would expect it to be 20. So
maybe Daniel played more than we remember. I don't know.
That's
because it leaks. I don't know. Is this just MLS?
My understanding is that yes, this is MLS only.
Okay. Well, anyway, yeah. I know Daniel did come back near the end for a bit. So
yeah.
But yeah. Either way, yeah. The point is stands.
Yeah.
Lot of turnover for goalies.
Yes, and the important part there is that we've retained the best of that selection, which is Daniel.
Not only the best of the selection from our team, but arguably in the running for the best selection of MLS for his 2024 season as well.
2023?
2023.
Yeah.
You're right, yeah. I mean, he was incredible. I mean, just off the back of my mind, I remember going to the Vancouver away game where he single-handedly got us 3 points.
Yeah.
It was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, second half of 2023 he was definitely the MVP for sure. So having seen these distributions and these retentions, does this change your perception at all of like what the success was or like what letter grade you'd give the Quakes in this offseason?
I think honestly, this statistic this chart stood out to me the most. The fact that we retained so much and the 3 teams which we took the most crucial pieces from are first, second, and third to last. I think that's good and exciting. Yeah, so in terms of the statistics, I think that it's great. And, a lot of players have gone out in the goalkeeping position and the, general attacking players. But I think that's fine. I think that's what you'd want, especially after last season. It's good. It's good and it's promising and it does reassure me. I'd already had good feelings about the offseason already, but seeing the statistics, seeing how we compared to other teams around the league makes me even more resolute in that feeling of optimism.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit known for having blind optimism when it comes to the Quakes, but this is something that I can actually point to and be like, okay, this validates my optimism.
Right, yeah.
We might win MLS Cup in 2025. We'll see. Maybe the Open Cup. We were talking last night about lineups, and I do think that you had a little bit of a better lineup than I did. So let's talk about how would you play the Quakes tomorrow?
If I was Bruce, what I would do is probably something like this. So the left lineup is when we are defending, the other team has had the ball for more than, let's say, 5-10 seconds. And things are, the other team is in front of us. We're not scrambling back. We're not, we're just sitting down where we should be. I will say that a big part of what influenced me in kind of putting out this lineup, there are some names that can get, exchanged for players that you don't see on this lineup. But a big part of it was seeing what we saw in the preseason. So we did see the back 5. We did see Espinoza as a right wing back. And that is kind of awkward. I think the 2 biggest things that are kind of constraining the way this team has to be set up is the fact Josef and Chicho must play because the money they're getting, because the goal threat they are, because you want to maximize the talent on the field. Those 2 players have to play. Okay, if we're taking that as a given, fine. Hernan also has to play. Espinoza also has to play. But that's the thing. Hernan and Chicho are kind of, they both can. Chicho, a striker, but also can offer something creatively. Hernan offer something creatively, but is also a goal scoring threat. Josef Martinez, out and out striker. But we also had a lack of productivity on the left wing, and that's kind of throws in the headache. From last season, knowing how bad we were defensively, I think defensive solidity should be priority number one, especially because we know we have so much talent going forward that's not something that we have to worry about as much. Which is why, for me, Mark Anthony Kaye, you need 2 sixes, or at least you need 2 midfielders that know how to defend. Mark Anthony Kaye and Harks are those players. And Espinoza, he is a winger that we know can defend. So if that's what Bruce is going to be, okay, I think that it's fine to see how that goes. And just generally, obviously, just based on the numbers, having 5 in the back, it makes sense that there's going to be more individuals defending, and you're going to be harder to break down. Now, there are questions, though, because what I said that this is kind of us when we're kind of, chilling and the other team has the ball. But when we win the ball, and transition historically has been pretty important, I think, for us, and it is a reason why Espinoza is so dangerous, is because he knows how to take advantage of transitional moments. That's the problem is, and that's something that I think we're going to have to see is, are we missing out on Espinoza in attacking transitions by having him in a starting position defending so far back? That's something that is yet to be seen. When we have the ball, though, I think that Espinoza doesn't have to hang around in the back as much. So to go to the lineup on the right, having a center back, especially a right-sided center back who is fast, allows the team to not rely so much on the fullback, especially when we have the ball. When we had the back 5 in the preseason, we saw it get pretty ugly with Chicago, and I think a big part of that is because we saw Espinoza and Costa going up the field. Now, I think it's pretty well established that Victor Costa, for all his defensive ability, isn't great on the ball. So I think that on the ball, when the Earthquakes have the ball, he doesn't have to go up as much. In allowing Muni to kind of move into the right side a bit more, if Espinoza wants to go up where he's his most dangerous, and just kind of have a back 4 when we have the ball. That way, we can have Espinoza up top, and if there is a defensive transition and the other team has a break, okay, we still have 4 in the back. Muni, who we've seen play right back before, Costa as well. Some of the college draft picks are also players who, from what I've read, are quick. They can play kind of more laterally at times. And we still have the 2 midfield 6s that have protection down the middle. And then up top, I have Chicho a little bit on the left, but if Hernan wants to go there, if Josef wants to go there, Espinoza, of course, at his best, should always kind of stay in the right side. But I think that Chicho, Hernan, and Josef, just kind of letting them do their thing is how you get the most out of them, because they're talented players. They're great on the ball. And honestly, I feel like they're players that are going to have a great connection when they're all out on the field. It's just about finding a way to leave them out on the field that doesn't turn into a defensive liability.
So defensively, it's similar to what we saw in preseason, but the main change you're doing in offense is that only Espinoza acts as a wing back and actually goes up the field. Costa stays back, and then you're keeping Chicho, Josef, and Hernan in sort of like free roam roles where they can
Josef,
rotate.
I think, stays as striker. Espinoza stays as the right winger, but I think Chicho and Hernan are the 2 where I think they can kind of move around, kind of how they feel. Maybe too specific, but I do remember Ian Russell's first game for us against, or I think it was his first game at PayPal.
Against Chicago?
Against Chicago, where Hernan scored, was on that left-hand side. And so if Hernan can go there, or if Chicho, being a right-footed player, wants to be there as a starting position and kind of drift in at times. Again, that's kind of just free roam, but yeah, I think more importantly, it's a back 4 when we have the ball to let Espinoza do his thing and not worry so much just let him. If he wants to go up, that's fine because we can cycle the ball. There's good players and hopefully get chances created.
I think of all the permutations that we thought of, this is probably the best one that we had. But I do understand your point of, given the players that we have, Bruce kind of has this predicament where he can't build a team from the defense up. He's kind of building it from the offense down. And by the time you get down, it's like, okay, Espinosa kind of only fits in one role. So I do get that. My counterpoint to this one, if that's what we want to call it, I did have something that I definitely don't think we'll see, at least not tomorrow or probably anytime soon. This is like, if I could have it my way, if I was playing FIFA, this is probably how I would put the team in. It's kind of like a 4-4-2, and the idea there is that Espinosa can be higher up the field. Some of these names aren't exact. Like, I do think Marie has a lot to offer, and I think he can slot in at for Costa or Lima, depending on the game or how they're feeling. I put in Buddha just out of spite for Pellegrino, because Pellegrino just, towards the end of the last season, we just saw too many missed opportunities.
And in the preseason before this season too, we saw a couple.
That's true.
Yeah.
So that's why I put in Buddha as like a left mid, which is definitely not something we've seen, and I definitely don't think that. Well, I don't know. We'll have to see.
They give him the 11, so obviously they see something in him. And I see something in him too. I mean, we've had, especially near the end of the season with Ian Russell. I mean, I remember there were some games where Buddha was playing over Bobasi.
Yeah.
The 9. So
I prefer Buddha over Bobasi or Pellegrino. The reason I don't think this is realistic is just because, like, historically, coaches have not given him that opportunity, and they've sided with Pellegrino. And I understand that there's also a reputation and an expectation based on how much Pellegrino is getting paid. It is a significant amount of money. It's like 900,000 if I remember correctly, somewhere in that ballpark. And so to have that kind of a player sit on the bench if they can play doesn't seem very realistic. But the one thing that gives me hope is that in the second game of Coachella in the preseason, when we had that very experimental, like, okay, let's put in the subs, let's put in the draft players, Pellegrino was in that list. And when they would rotate players from like the starting 11 to more sub players, like we saw in the Chicago second half, I think it was Chicago's second half, Pellegrino did come in. And so maybe that is an indication that Bruce Arena doesn't feel too highly on Pellegrino. Only time will tell, but I think the main point is...
if that gives him a kick up like the backside and gets him to start firing... Fair enough. I'm fine with that too.
I mean, it kind of worked with the Bobasi last year when Judd was getting the minutes. But the point about this isn't like who should play at left mid. It's more of like, this is my solution for having Espinosa higher up the field, but still have Chicho and Josef up top. And I think that is a 4-4-2 or like a 4-1-2-1-2 if you want to get very technical about it. But all of this is speculation, and we'll find out tomorrow. We're recording this Friday night. Tomorrow, like I said, we play against Real Salt Lake at home. It's the first time we've opened a season at home in quite a number of years. I think we have a lot of in-person experiences of opening on an away game and throwing the game at the last minute. So I'm excited to play at home because maybe that is the curse. Starting away is not the way.
I think if there's one thing that we've taken away from the past couple of seasons, it's starting is really important. The way we start the season just kind of sets the tone for the rest of the season. So hopefully, tomorrow we see that good, strong start to the season.
Most of all for like fan sentiment and trust in Bruce, because the preseason was ugly. So it's probably going to be one of the most important games of the season. Fingers crossed.
Looking forward to it though. All things said, very much looking forward to it.
Yeah. A little bit of anxiety, but a lot of optimism. And whatever happens, we'll be here to cover it. If you made it this far, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.